Fort Ringgold. Today, this South Texas historic site is both a center of education and a monument to the past. Modern-day Fort Ringgold is a bustling educational complex, complete with offices, schools, and of course, a football stadium.
Perez keeps it on the right side. Perez inside the 30.
Walk across Fort Ringgold and you'll find a variety of artifacts, documents, and photographs, all testaments to the important role this fort has played in our nation's history. Ringgold has held influence not only in Rio Grande City or Texas, but over the U.S. as a whole. Through the gates of Ringgold, past heroes and villains, soldiers, ranchers, and business people. Each of these groups helping build and define Texas spirit.
So the purpose was to secure the boundary as much as anything else by making a physical presence here.
Passing years brought a brand new hero through the doors of Fort Ringgold as principals, teachers, and students populated the modern Fort Ringgold educational complex. There can be little doubt this historic fort has shaped Rio Grande City for generations. First, as a military outpost, and later as a place of learning. The transition between these two missions, however, caused conflict that changed the city forever.
And the question was what to do with it. Some wanted a 2-year college, a 4-year college, a commercial center, an airport. Nobody really knew what to do. And Rio was kind of apathetic about it, because the soldiers were just returning from World War II. So the focus was on them.
To understand that conflict, we first have to know the fort's history. Looking at Ringgold, we see a complex that is part of Rio Grande City ISD. Today, Fort Ringgold is a point of community pride. The school fostered change within the district. Education brought students success. Today, Ringgold students have influenced numerous Rio Grande City students to move forward and achieve great things.
Yes, we always want our students to move forward, to be successful, to always have pride in what they do. We are a very patriotic town, and we instill that in the students.
Brothers and sisters, as I call your name, please stand.
Colonel Ross Barrera attended Fort Ringgold in 1978. As a student, he quickly began to take an interest in his surroundings.
There was a lot of yearbooks from years past, and I started looking at those, and I saw where there was a different generation of folks that were in my community who were no longer there.
Ross looked to his teachers for information about Fort Ringgold's history. Many of these educators were not only veterans, but also the children of soldiers once stationed at Fort Ringgold.
So I further started exploring that, and going through 5th grade all the way through high school at Fort Ringgold, I think it defined my drive to learn more about Fort Ringgold and its people and what came before them and how it got established.
The drive to learn about Fort Ringgold's traditions influenced Colonel Barrera to not only pursue a military career, but also dig deeper into the stories of his hometown's legendary fort.
One of my favorite buildings is, of course, the barracks. The barracks with the Moorish arches. You can stare at one of those barracks. There's 5 of them, and along the parade field. And you can only imagine what this soldiers who came out of New York, Kentucky, Virginia, coming down to South Texas as early as the 1870s, all the way through 1946, and what they saw, what they thought about our area.
As a former teacher, we've always tried to keep that in our life, that it's been a fort. It was a military place. Soldiers slept here. Soldiers lived here. They had, shotguns. They used to have horses here. Trying to keep that part of our history with our kids too.
Looking at the buildings today, it can be difficult to see beyond the modern complex. But imagine, it is the mid-1850s. Incursions from along the river are a constant concern. Smugglers and rustlers from across Texas threaten the livelihoods of families and businesses in the region. Protecting the people of the area, Fort Ringgold. Beginning in the mid-1800s, Fort Ringgold served as a source of protection for Rio Grande City and much of the Rio Grande River. During much of the 1800s, Camp Ringgold was the region's primary defense. Soldiers from the camp patrolled the area between Fort McIntosh, located in Laredo, Texas, 107 miles to the west, and Fort Brown, located in Brownsville, Texas, 100 miles to the east.
Ringgold, like Brownsville and Laredo, were major bases, and there were smaller bases like White's Ranch and Clarksville and Roma.
Leaving troops stationed at the fort approximately 207 miles of rough brush, mesquite trees, and South Texas temperatures to defend. Ultimately, Fort Ringgold's location helped ensure stability and economic growth for Rio Grande City and the region.
The fort was named after Captain Samuel Ringgold, who was the first American officer to be killed at Palo Alto in 1846. And so not too long after they established the camp at Davis's Landing, they began to call it Camp Ringgold. It protected the border and the frontier.
During the U.S. Civil War, Fort Ringgold was occupied at varying times by both Southern and Northern troops. The South primarily utilized the fort as a staging ground for the sale of cotton to ports of call around the world. As the tides of war turned to the North's favor, so did the occupation of Fort Ringgold. And by war's end, the fort's mission returned to protecting the border.
With the collapse of the Confederate government, most of the local governments in Texas also collapsed, and there was really anarchy, and the Army basically was the law.
As a base for law and order, immediately after the Civil War, Fort Ringgold housed a now famous group of soldiers.
There were Buffalo soldiers there from 1866 to 75, and at other times.
And they came down to try to prevent former Confederates from moving into Mexico and continuing the war from there, stop bandit raids across the river, Indian raids across the river, and also to stop the Mexican revolution from spreading north of the river as well.
During the times immediately after the Civil War, the African American troops were a welcome addition to the Rio Grande City community. While a number of troops discovered a love for the region, many became homesick and longed to return to a family living outside of Texas. The troops were quick to notice that their tour of duty at Ringgold seemed to be extended, due in no small part to the location of their enlistment.
They understood that they enlisted for a period of 3 years, but yet they saw other men being mustered out, and they were retained. For many, the sentiment or the only reason for being retained was that they were soldiers from slave states.
One famous letter discusses the beauty of South Texas.
The weather has been truly enchanting for the last 3 days, and the boys have just completed their winter quarters. Though not as good as those we had last year in Virginia, still they are preferable. This day 1 year ago was a rather warm day for our regiment at White House, Virginia, but you know all about that, so I shall say no more. There are but 2 or 3 Americans in the place. If our regiment stays here any length of time, we will all speak Spanish as we are learning very fast.
Times changed, and as the Rio Grande Valley became more populated, Fort Ringgold's mission evolved from a defensive outpost into a training area for World War I and later World War II soldiers.
We used to go there. People could go in and out.
So my cousin Ella Mae and I would go to the polo field because they had, across from the theater, north of there, they had the polo field.
And there was a theater, and we used to pay a nickel, 10 cents, something. And we used to go see Tarzan's movies.
We would have the army, the infantry unit, march through town. So all the townspeople would come and we'd wave and clap and be happy.
So, paydays, we had to go deliver hamburgers and whatnot to the quarters.
I was a chime boy, a true chime boy.
Everybody and their brother had a dog. And you'd be afraid to get out at 9, 10 o'clock to go make a delivery.
And I used to go, shine the boots of the soldiers.
And I always had some bones there. Anytime a dog came, I just pitched him out.
We had a very nice relationship with Fort Ringgold.
Rio Grande City was the final training ground before jumping into a war in the European theaters.
In 1940, the base almost closed, but because of what was looming in Europe, they had to reopen it quickly as a basic training center.
During the 30s and 40s, Fort Ringgold was a center of commerce, entertainment, and daily life for many who lived in Rio Grande City. The local economy relied on the fort, and the livelihood of several businesses depended on it.
All I can tell you is that the soldiers were there, my grandparents, there were 5 siblings. So they all had part in helping in running the Mexico, because there was so much business at that time.
While Fort Ringgold continued as an important source of employment for the region, other aspects of the military base brought economic growth to the life of Rio Grande City. The people in the town built businesses to support the soldiers.
I remember the fort when I was 5 years old, and we lived in town, and my daddy worked at the fort as a fireman.
My grandmother used to work at Fort Ringgold, at the laundry.
As World War II came to an end, so did Fort Ringgold's training requirements. Soldiers returned from battle only to march out of Rio Grande City one last time. This exodus left the residents of Rio Grande City with empty buildings and land.
When the soldiers were pulled out and left, then the whole community felt the financial impact, because grocery stores, the restaurants, and there were several restaurants in Rio Grande at that time.
While many communities suffer economic downturn when the military leave town, Rio Grande City was on the brink of an entirely different type of change.
Look, guess what Roma's trying to do? Roma had a very forward-looking mayor at that time, Ruben Guerra. He was the first mayor of Roma. And he got the brilliant idea of putting in a bid to buy Fort Ringgold from the War Department, as it was called at that time, and then turn around and lease it to the state. The state was looking for a place for a TB hospital.
The purchase of Fort Ringgold would change the community forever. To understand how owning the fort would impact the city, it is first important to understand the region's politics. One political party held dominance over Rio Grande City for decades, a response to the regional Anglo-political dominance. Setting political roots in the late 1800s, the old party found true political success by the early 1900s.
At that time, it was nothing but a series of Anglo-American judges. The first Hispanic doesn't come in until 1915 with the election of Eugenio Garza, who of course was sponsored by what we would call the old party in Roma.
The idea of we can do it, we can do better than what our parents did. So how do you get it? How do you get these things, you're going to have to get the political base.
The origins of the old party can be traced back to an enterprising and politically motivated citizen from Roma, Texas. That citizen, Don Guerra. He founded what would eventually evolve into the old party. The party's mission: to limit Anglo-American power in the Rio Grande Valley. You see, at Stark County's founding, Anglo judges ruled the courthouses. Guerra, along with a few others, thought they were ready to change the status quo. Political power began to shift as the party of Guerra gained influence. This influence spread across Stark County to include Rio Grande City. Quickly, Hispanics won elections, often creating positive change across Stark County.
Rio Grande City didn't have to fight to get Hispanics on the ballot. That's all there was.
The old party held political power for generations, but change was on the horizon. World War II brought change to the U.S. As soldiers returned to communities across the country, they brought with them a generation gap. New ideas came home with veterans, and cities across the United States faced a new dilemma: embrace the modern ideas of those returning from the war, or cling to traditional ways.
Soldiers came back. Their ideas were different. They had gone to Paris. They had been to, the Pacific and fought there. They had seen how other cities in the United States lived, and they came back with the idea is, we can make this different. It can work differently. And they started their own political party.
The veterans became experienced leaders during wartime and wanted to deliver change to the region. Old party leaders expected returning soldiers to fall in line and take orders from the established system hierarchy. But returning soldiers were not interested in following traditional paths to power and broke off with the old party.
You might say that that would be the spiritual genesis of the political system here. And even to this day, somebody will say, no es de aquí, es de afuera.
In Spanish, they were referred to los de aquí and los de afuera, those from here and those not from here. And while roots of the new party can be traced back to the 1930s, the close of World War II gave the party a chance at real power.
That was the whole debate of the two parties. Well, of that party. Because I think the only party that existed before the new party was the old party.
The new party was born out of something called the Free Democrats. The Free Democrats. One of their leaders was Dr. Alexander Hedley, the father of George Edgerton. They were called Free Democrats because their one goal was to topple the Guerra machine.
Everybody was a Democrat. However, around World War II, slightly before and a little bit after, the Democrats split in two. One faction called itself the New Party, and the other faction the Old Party.
For Rio Grande City, after World War II, politics mixed into all aspects of daily life. Loyalties to either the old or new party ran deep.
My brothers and I used to stand on the fence and shout at the new party, "Que viva el Partido Viejo," which means long live the old party. And then others shouted back, "Que viva el Partido Nuevo." So even at 5, 6 years old, we had become politicians already.
But my dad said that you knew immediately who was who. You knew who was a guerrista and who was not.
The old versus new parties were the dominant political forces as Fort Ringgold closed. And while the parties were able to peacefully coexist, at the close of World War II, a new challenge brewed. Rio Grande City began to experience growing pains. The old party pushed to have the fort become a tuberculosis hospital. Soldiers returning to the city swelled the ranks of the new party and had different thoughts surrounding Ringgold's future.
The old party wanted to buy the fort to make a tuberculosis hospital.
The new party that belonged to the people who were composed of military men, mostly from the World War II, they did not want the TB hospital.
Rio Grande City was turning into an area divided. Should Fort Ringgold be refitted into a hospital? Or should the school district buy it out and use it for educational purposes?
Each party dug in and prepared to fight to see their vision through. The old party working for a hospital versus the new party fighting for new school lands.
They could see right there in town buildings that they could use without having to spend the money to build new buildings. They could modify what they had.
At this time, the old party had lost control of Rio Grande City School Board and searched for a method to regain control of city politics. The hospital offered that chance.
Every time I ran for an election, the new party won. So all of the old party was put on to side.
However, stigma surrounding TB proved divisive.
In those days, when you said TB, people would get as apprehensive as about AIDS that we saw in the 70s and 80s.
Unaware of how the disease spread, many members of the community feared opening a TB hospital would cause an uncontrollable spread of the infection.
I was about 7 years old, and my sister was just a brand new baby. And Dad would say, "Look at your sister." Because I asked him, "What's wrong with a TB hospital?" I always thought that all hospitals were good. He said, "Son, we will never be able to go outside and ride around with your sister. The poison coming from that hospital will kill her." I said, "Oh my God."
The new party was not above helping the spread of misinformation concerning TB. Not only did the party members believe Ringgold should become part of the school district, the new party also recognized they were fighting for their political futures. In the political battle of hospital versus school, the new party understood if Fort Ringgold did not become an academic center, all political power would disappear.
So in buying Fort Ringgold, we were always told, look at what the Guerras wanted to do to us. They were going to wipe us out with a TB hospital.
Seemingly overnight, the decision was made, due in no small part to the citizens' misunderstanding of TB. In a hard-fought campaign, the citizens of Rio Grande City cast their votes.
People were afraid that the TB would spread out, so they voted against it.
Fort Ringgold turned over to the school district, and as quickly as the controversy erupted, it disappeared. Fort Ringgold became part of the school district. The old and the new parties continued to dominate politics, and the entire community came together to make the school a success. While some will always reminisce about the possibility of a hospital, most are glad Fort Ringgold was sold to the school district.
My first visit there, I was really struck by both the preservation of post-Civil War buildings at Brownsville and Ringgold, but especially Ringgold because they had been very little altered.
The community grew to love Fort Ringgold as a center for learning. In the late 2000s, a mural was painted on the Fine Arts Building. Painted as a gift to the community by Mr. Alberto Barrera, the mural represents Fort Ringgold's first years as a school.
I was always concerned of the fact that we never were able to give the school something. And the president of the class from Oregon, he would come every year and he says, "Gee, I wish we had something to present." And then when he found out that I had made that big mural and I didn't charge them at all, he was real glad.
Also added in the 2000s, a landmark that can be seen from across Rio Grande City. The Fort Ringgold flagpole is now a city icon, a gift given to the city when the original flagpole fell.
You can see it through downtown. People were used to seeing Old Glory flying high. When that flag was not flying, community came together and said, "What's going on?"
The new flag brought people onto the campus. People came to see Old Glory, but left with an image of the once strong and sturdy fort slowly deteriorating. The fort that was once able to protect the city against bandit raids couldn't defend itself against neglect and time.
People actually woke up and saw the need to fix our fort for economic reasons, for historical reasons.
Except for the building they called the Lee headquarters, which was built in the antebellum period. Most of the buildings were post-Civil War, but it has a phenomenal history up really into the middle of the 20th century. and it's an interesting and important story to be told.
To remind younger generations of the fort's value, the Revive Fort Ringgold initiative came to life. The purpose of this community organization is to restore a big part of the community's history, beginning with the fort itself.
It has been here since 1848. We had Robert E. Lee here, and the buildings need to be refurbished because once you take something for granted and you think it's going to last forever, it's not.
Revive Fort Ringgold not only has a mission to restore the fort and surrounding buildings, but also to bring the community together as a whole.
Fort Ringgold is important to Rio Grande City because it is a jewel. It defines a moment of history, not only in Texas, for the Republic of Texas, the United States, and even our local community.
Students attending modern-day Fort Ringgold Elementary can never truly imagine the rich history of their school's namesake. From fighting border bandits to teaching children, Fort Ringgold has been reshaped and converted into an institution of historical significance and education.
For 150 years, Fort Ringgold's history intertwined with Rio Grande City's. At the close of World War II, Fort Ringgold fell under Rio Grande City's charge. As a new party fought to bring Fort Ringgold into the school district, the established leadership pushed for a hospital. In the end, the entire community came together and built a successful educational complex.
Fort Ringgold can be or is the center of life in Rio Grande City. Rio Grande City is where people have so many memories of coming to school here, coming to the league, having concerts, coming to football games. That's what it represents, all the good times that we have had.
Despite conflicts, the people of Rio Grande City always came together, ensuring Fort Ringgold would continue to serve the community. The soldiers may be gone, but Fort Ringgold is here to stay.
El día en que yo me muera, atentamente quisiera que me canten mi canción. Dios quiera y se me conceda, de otra manera me fuera lleno de desilusión. Quiero que un mariachi cante con su voz fuerte y brillante a la orilla de mi ataúd. Mi canción lindo Río Grande que les cantaba a mis padres allá por mi juventud. Pondré ahí mi despedida, punto final a mi vida y para siempre a Dios me iré. And I forgot the break.